Well, good morning, everyone. How are you doing this morning? Did I hear Williamsburg? Is Williamsburg in the house someplace? Are they here yet? All right, Williamsburg, one of my great college friends is from Williamsburg, Shane Sandersfeld. I saw him just a couple weeks ago. Nashua Plainfield, you're around here too, is that right? I've got a few relatives there. I may not claim them right now. You may know who I'm talking about. We'll just leave that as is, but it's just great to be back. It's a little surreal. I grew up in Parkersburg. I consider this my hometown. I did all my growing up years here from kindergarten through my senior year. My graduating class was 32, and that included 2 foreign exchange students. So I love just this small town and getting back here. I'm in Wisconsin right now. But there's one thing that I want to address, and I just want to put that out here, because I know you're probably wondering about this. The video mentioned that there were 4 individuals from this high school that went on to play in the NFL, and I know you're all out there going, I'm wondering if this guy is one of those NFL players. So this next slide has 5 pictures on it. I want to see if you can tell which picture doesn't fit with the rest of them. Yeah, it would be that one. It would be that one there. Now, I didn't get the memo. I didn't realize that you're not supposed to smile like a fool for football pictures. You're supposed to look mean and menacing. But I did. I played football under Coach Thomas, and I was a captain my senior year, and there was 2 other captains. Jay Jordan, he led all classes in the state of Iowa in rushing, and he went on to play on a full-ride scholarship at Iowa State. Dan Rule, he was an all-conference, all-state linebacker. He won state in wrestling. He went on and won nationals in wrestling. And I got a 1 on my solo contest at district. So I felt pretty good about that. I felt like I could, kind of stand up with those guys a little bit. I was feeling nostalgic coming back here, and I was looking at the memory book that my mom put together for me. Anything that my name ever appeared on, she kept and saved and put it in the memory book. And so I went back and I checked out my statistics. I was a quarterback. In my junior year, I looked at my passing statistics, and it said I was 7 for 19 for 117 yards. Now, that wasn't one half. That wasn't an entire game. That was the entire season. I had 7 completions out of 19 attempts for 117 yards. That's averaging less than 1 completion per game. That was before Applington and Parkersburg had consolidated as schools, and I looked where I ranked in the conference among the passing leaders, and I was tied for 8th with the backup quarterback from Applington. That's Matt Lindemann. That's where I was. But great leaders know how to maximize their team's strengths and work around some of their deficits. And Coach Thomas definitely was a great leader. And one of the plays that we ran an option play. And for those of you who aren't familiar with what happens on an option play, as a quarterback, I would take the snap, and then I would quickly pivot and turn, and I would find my running back, and I would do a slide step. I'd put that football right in his belly, and then I would read that defensive end. If that defensive end was going to tackle my running back, I'm supposed to pull that football out and then run around the end. When that play came into the huddle, when I was quarterback, this is what it sounded like. Option right, give. Option right, give. You understand that the third word negates the first word there. There was no option. Coach Thomas said, you know what? We're not going to leave any sense of discernment or judgment on Neil's part. You give that ball, and then you get out of the way. And so I appreciate all the life lessons that I learned from him. And it's just, like I said, it's just a privilege to be a part of this. So obviously I'm not here today because of my athletic prowess. And since an NFL career was a non-starter, I eventually in my career became a professional speaker. And I started a company called Life IQ, where I help groups and individuals work, play, relate, and live intelligently. And I get the privilege of traveling all over the country and speaking to audiences like yours. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about Life IQ and what it means to live intelligently. So here's a definition of Life IQ, and I think this is in your notes. Life IQ is about figuring out who you are, the kind of life you want to lead, and making the choices to achieve it. Figuring out who you are, what kind of life you want to lead, and making the choices to achieve that. And my tagline really is live intelligently. And I love talking about this stuff. And if we're talking about live intelligently, what we're getting at is you really need to live intentionally. Have a plan. Have some goals. Make some choices. Make some decisions. Have the discipline it takes to reach some of those goals later in your life. Now, sometimes it's instructive when you're trying to make a point in one direction to take a look at the exact opposite and see what kind of interesting things we can find from contrasting those two concepts. So I'm going to tell you a story about a friend of mine who was living unintelligently. This is a friend of mine named Myron, and Myron and I met in college, and we were both DJs at our college radio station. My radio name was Joe Christian. Last name first is Christian Joe, and I'm on your radio, 94.5 KCFS. I was a DJ because it was my work study. Myron was a DJ because he was passionate about it. Now, being a DJ on a small college radio station wasn't all that difficult. We only broadcast from noon to midnight. If you were the first 3-hour shift, you had to go climb up all the stairs, turn on the transmitter, and then do your show. If you were the last one, you signed off at midnight and climbed up those stairs and turned off the transmitters. And we played music, we read the news. It wasn't all that difficult. But because we were a student-led radio station, there were these times that we had dead air. And sometimes dead air came because we weren't very good at transitioning from one song to the next. Sometimes dead air happened just because someone didn't show up for their shift. But sometimes dead air was excusable because there was breaks on campus and people weren't around, and we weren't expected to cover our shifts then. But Myron, because he was so passionate about radio, he said, you know what, I'm going to cover this by myself. I'm going to do all 12 hours one Saturday. So he packed up a cooler, he had food and beverages in there, and off he went, and he would have to run down the stairs and run back up. We didn't have a bathroom right nearby the station. So he got up there just in time to crossfade into the next song. And as the afternoon wore on into the evening, he didn't get any phone calls, but again, that wasn't unusual. People weren't around during that time, so he didn't think too much of it. But he kept himself going, thinking, you know what, I'm making people's day a little better by playing great variety of music, by inserting some witty observations here and there. And as it got toward midnight, he was mentally and physically exhausted. 12 hours is a long time, but he felt pretty proud of himself that he was able to accomplish that. And so he walked up the stairs to finish the last part of his broadcasting day, and he went to open up the door and look to turn off the transmitter when he discovered he never turned it on. So he had been essentially in a room talking to himself and playing music for himself for 12 straight hours. So I'm fascinated with human behavior, especially what happens in our minds when you come across just a massive disaster like this. So I'm asking him all these questions like, Myron, what were you thinking when you discovered that you hadn't turned on the transmitter? And he said, I just stood there and I was frozen. I couldn't figure out how I could forget such a simple step. And then I made a vow never to tell anybody this story because it's so embarrassing. But then he decided that he could trust me not to repeat that story to anybody else. Another bad decision on his part. That's on him. He should have known better. It's a great example of living unintelligently. Missing one crucial step ended up negating everything else that he did that day. And it really made that half a day for him somewhat meaningless. And when we think about living intelligently, living intentionally, we want to look at what we can do as leaders to live a meaningful life. So there's some things that we're going to unpack here. A brief story again about my background. Undergrad in psychology, sociology. I took psychology and sociology from Coach Kearns over here. As a junior, I didn't even know what those classes meant. I just knew that there was something about them that was very, very intriguing. But I have an undergrad in psychology, sociology, and master's in counseling. I spent the first third of my career working with delinquent adolescents. It was fantastic. It was like free parent training from some of the most gifted manipulators you'll ever want to meet. It was great. And I watched some of the staff work with these kids, and some of them would just get flustered. Because these kids were good. They were good at pushing your buttons. They were good at getting you really upset. And others just knew how to be calm and cool and collected. And one staff in particular, by the name of Dave, he was just getting verbally assaulted by this kid. This kid had found out some bad news, and he was just enraged and yelling and screaming and stomping around. But I watched Dave handle this situation, and he just kind of stood there, and he was calm, and his body language was quiet. He didn't counter anything. He didn't argue with the kid. He just kind of let the storm blow itself out. And then after the kid got done and quieted down, that's when Dave started talking. He said, "Wow, that was quite a doozy there. You were really going. Is there anything left in there? Because we want to get it all out right now." And I got to give you credit. I've been called a lot of things in my career, but you call me two things I've never been called before. So I got to give you some originality points for that. And just his way of handling some of that, just being calm and cool, being respectful, inserting a little humor, he knew not to take it personally. And I said, what is the difference between some of these staff that really know how to do this well and those that struggle? And I finally read a book on emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence just opened my eyes. Now, there's several great authors out there talking about this, but there was something there I'm like, this is some of the secrets that I'm looking at when I look at people who are successful in my life. They're able to do some of these principles. So if you take a look at this slide, and we're not going to talk about all of these today, we have a limited amount of time, but we're going to concentrate on the first three. But let me just walk you through these. And this comes from a book called Emotional Intelligence 2.0. This is a grid that the authors use in that book. Self-awareness is step one of emotional intelligence. It is the foundation, and we're going to talk about that. Step two is self-management, self-regulation, self-discipline, the ability to delay gratification. If you go down here, we're talking about social competence, social awareness, and relationship management. And we're not going to get to those today. But there's one piece that I had to add, with all due respect to the authors of the book, that I found in my experience, because those bottom two talk about relating to other people. And what I found when I work with people is that those people who are not self-confident, who have a lot of insecurities, they have a difficult time focusing on others, because at the end of the day, it's really all about them. They're either managing for effect, they're trying to make themselves look a little better than they are, or they're trying to tear you down to bring you down to their level. Self-confident people are able to go to that next step. They're able to have some social awareness and empathy and able to manage some of those relationships. So we're going to talk about these first three here: self-awareness, self-management, and self-confidence. So starting out with self-awareness, Gallup out of Omaha, Nebraska, did a poll to figure out how many people, what percentage of people are self-aware. Step one of emotional intelligence, this is the first step, and they found only 20% of people are self-aware. Now, that is a sobering statistic, and so hopefully we'll increase your self-awareness today. Here's a definition. Self-awareness is the ability to describe yourself as most people experience you. We're not going to have time to do this today, but you may want to jot this down in your notes. This is kind of an exercise that you can do to go along with this. This is something that I do with leaders across all kinds of industries. And it sounds really, really simple, but if you would write that down in a sentence or two, how you would describe yourself as most people experience you, tell me who you are in a sentence or two. It sounds like a really simple assignment, but it is actually quite difficult, because you find yourself struggling with, well, this is how I'd like to be, but how is it that I am actually? So you may want to jot that down as something that you return to later. So how do we increase our self-awareness? What are some steps that we can take? we can start out by paying attention to some of those things that we are interested in. If I can get my clicker to work here. What are some of the classes that you're interested in? Your interests, your hobbies. There's some clues there that should speak to you about what it is that you may be passionate about and where you want to go later in life. You also can have some conversations with parents and mentors, get some feedback from them. There's some personality tests. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Myers-Briggs personality tests. We're going to talk about that, just one little segment of that in a second. But when I work with leaders, especially new leaders, if I get a chance to do this right off the bat, that's the first thing that I do. Because as leaders, you're on a stage. You're on a stage like this, and people are always watching you. They're constantly watching you. So if you don't own your stuff, good, bad, or otherwise, they're going to be talking about those things. So you might as well know this about yourself and own it. To start out with, I mentioned the mentors and teachers, friends, parents, and make sure that it's constructive feedback. It's things that are actionable, things that you could get better. But that's helpful in increasing your self-awareness. And then I do have a kind of a personal question that I need to ask you in just a second here. Yeah, Kelly, there we go. Oh, I got to talk about emotions. So a big thing with self-awareness is understanding what emotions that you're feeling at any given time. When my kids were little, we did these things called mad, sads, and glads. At the end of the day, at supper time, at bedtime, we would talk about when were you mad today? When were you sad? When were you glad today? And helping them start identifying what was going on during the day that made them feel that particular emotion. And as they've gotten older, they're teenagers now, we start talking about more sophisticated emotions. When were you proud of yourself today? When were you a little irritated? When do you find yourself being optimistic? What mood do you feel most of the time? And it's important to pay attention to our emotions. And the longer you do this, the more you discover that there's really some things behind our emotions that's a little deeper than we may first anticipate. Let me give you a quick example with this. I was working with a wonderful, wonderful colleague named Julie, but as we started working together, I found her to be a little irritating, and she was in an administrative supportive role to me, and so she was there. She didn't report to me. I didn't report to her, but she was asking questions that were really outside of the scope of what I needed her to do to help me out, and I found that some of her questions kind of bugged me, and I found myself in a kind of a foul mood one day, and I had to go, okay, I'm in a bad mood, I'm kind of grumpy, I'm short with other people, let's go back, let's retrace our steps. Where is that coming from? Well, that conversation with Julie didn't go really well. And what was it that she wanted? Oh, she was asking about why I was doing this certain process a certain way. And I didn't really like that, because she doesn't need to know that information. So that's where my bad mood is coming from. But don't stop there. Often anger and frustration is just masking some other deeper emotion. So as I went further, I said, well, what was it about that bugged me so much? Well, some of the questions she was asking, I didn't have the answers to. I should have. I didn't have some certain things done that I should have had done. And so as I reflected on it more, what was I feeling? I was feeling maybe a little embarrassed. I was feeling negligent. Did that have anything to do with Julie in the end? That had to do with me. So as you understand and get better at understanding where your emotions come from, that's going to increase your self-awareness as well. And then you can ask yourself some self-reflective, introspective questions. And here are some of these questions. You can ask yourself, what kind of personality do I have? Who am I? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What are my natural gifts and talents? What kind of passions do I have? What kind of goals? What are my values? Even doing a quick value exercise, and we don't have time to do that today, but I do this with adults, and we spend 5 minutes. Give me your top 5 values. And then let's do a calendar check. Let's see, where you're spending your time will tell me if you really truly value that, because time is the ultimate litmus test for values. But I do have one more question, and we're just getting to know each other, and you seem like lovely folks, but I do have one more question here that's somewhat intrusive. Are you annoying? Now, I want to see, by a raise of your hands, how many people in here are annoying. Okay, I've got a few. All right, not too bad. Let me ask the question a different way. Is anyone in here sitting beside someone who's annoying? Yeah, there we go. Now, we got a few more there. I hate to break this to you. For those of you who didn't raise your hands, I applaud those that did raise your hands, that you admitted that you're annoying. Every last one of you, you are. You're so annoying, you have no idea. I mean, just look at your sponsor. They'll nod their head. They know, okay? You are annoying. And the reason why I know that is because I study personalities, and you being you is going to be annoying to someone with an opposite personality or opposite preference. You may not even be meaning to be annoying. It's just naturally going to happen. So let me give you an example here of one of the things that Myers-Briggs studies is extroversion and introversion. Very simple one. Let's just talk about that for a second. Extroverts, you get a lot of energy from talking. You love being around people. You are verbal processors. What that means is if it's in here, it's typically coming out here. And there's not much filter between this, and sometimes this ends up here, because if you see something, you feel like you need to say something. You get your energy from being around others. Introverts, you can love people, you can enjoy being around people, but at the end of the day, it's enough people. You're just done. No more. Because for you to get your energy back, you need to have some downtime. You need to take your dog for a walk. You need to do some yoga. You need to go for a run. You need some extra, whatever it is, just to chill out. So I do a lot of travel, and you're not going to necessarily believe this, but I'm an introvert. I love doing what I'm doing, but you people take a lot of energy, okay? You wipe me out afterwards. So I need some downtime after that. So when I'm on my flights across the country and I get on a plane, I get out my headphones, and I'm not talking earbuds. I'm talking about the big honking headphones, and I put those on. My Kindle comes out. My shoulders come in. Everything about my body language says, leave me alone. And here he comes, strolling down the aisle, bigger than life. He's saying hi to everybody, and he's sitting right next to me. And he plops down and says, hey, what's your name, and where are you traveling, and business or pleasure, and off he goes. And I'm sitting there going, oh my goodness, how annoying. If I'm perfectly honest, I don't know who you are. I don't care who you are. This is far more interesting what's in front of me than talking with you. And he's sitting there going, how rude. I just want to spend some time talking through the flight together. What a lovely way to pass the time. So even recognizing that you being you is going to be annoying to someone else, that can help with our self-awareness as well. This is called, I don't know if you're familiar with this is called the Johari window. And this is something that we use as a tool to help people understand what others know about us. There's kind of this public part of our personality. We know this about ourselves. Others know that about us. But then there's this piece that we know about ourselves, but not everybody else knows that. That's something that we kind of keep private. But then there's things called blind spots that other people know about us, and we don't have any insight about that. And there's more blind spots than we would care to admit, and I'll give a couple of examples of that in a little bit. And finally, there's some things that we don't know and are yet to be discovered as well. There's an interesting study that was done at the University of Tennessee that talks about how good we are at first impressions. And what would happen is, let's pretend we haven't met each other. And I come out on stage, and the only thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to read a weather report. And I'm going to say, you know what, today the high is going to be 60, winds out of the south to southwest, 10 to 20 miles an hour, whatever it is. And I put down that weather report, and I exit stage left. And they ask you a question, and they ask me a question. How smart am I? And you are going to be more accurate about my IQ with just those 2 or 3 minutes than I am. You're going to be 66% more accurate. And there's a reason behind that, because as much as I talk about it's important to have be self-reflective, at the end of the day, we're lousy self-evaluators. We're really bad at this. I was working with a manager, and we asked them to do an evaluation, a self-evaluation on their competencies. On a scale of 1 to 10, how good are you? And this person gave themselves 10s all the way down. And he had 5 people reporting to him, and all 5 of them gave him 1s. This wasn't one disgruntled employee. This was not an outlier. Everybody else said, no, this guy's lousy. So, fascinated by human behavior, this is going to be a really interesting conversation with him when I give him the numbers. And when I ask him to explain what's the difference between these two? Why did they rank you down here, and why did you rank yourself up here? What's going on here? And he said, they're wrong. They're wrong. I'm a fantastic leader. And so at that point, what do you do with that? His self-awareness is so low. This wasn't a reclamation project. This wasn't someone that we were going to coach up. Real-world example, we said, thanks but no thanks, and they let that person go. Because it wasn't fair to those other 5 people to have them report to someone who is so out of touch with their self-awareness and so ineffective in their role. There's another study that said college students do a superior job of figuring out what relationships are going to work or not. And I'm guessing that may occur in high school as well. We see, Tony and Karen together, and we're like, nah, that's not going to happen. That's not going to last. And if you ask Karen, she would say, but we're in love. This is the one. When we're in it, we can't see it. But when we're outside and being objective, yeah, it's pretty obvious. And there's a term that we use in psychology called positive illusion. And positive illusion means that we are little kitties, but we see a lion in the mirror. We don't accurately see ourselves. And here's some more statistics around this. Only 2% of high school seniors believe their leadership skills are below average. All right, let's click through here. 25%, they're in the top 1% in their ability to get along with others. 94% of college professors report doing above average work. I'm not great at math, but I don't think that quite equates there. And then most people will describe themselves as they are more likely than their peers to provide accurate self-assessments. We have this positive illusion going on here that we're not great at seeing ourselves how we truly are. Now, here's the other thing that I need to tell you guys. Your brains don't quite work right yet. They just don't. As teenagers, it doesn't work right yet. And there's some scientific studies behind this. Your brain may not fully develop until your mid-20s. And there's kind of a way that we go about this with. It starts with brainstem, midbrain, limbic, cortex. There's a pattern there. And your brain develops from the bottom up, but it may not be fully developed until your mid-20s. Now, I want to hit the pause button right here. What are your brains telling you right now about the information that I just gave you? What's your brain saying? This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. That may be true for some of my friends, but my brain is perfectly developed, thank you very much. Are some of those thoughts sneaking in there? Well, they may, because your brain... I came up with a little phrase here to help you remember this. The thing you use to think thinks it thinks better than it thinks. The thing you use to think thinks it thinks better than it thinks. The thing you use to think thinks it thinks better than it thinks. So you cannot trust the very part of your brain that says, no, we got this. We're good. We're smart. It doesn't work yet. Let me give you a quick example. For some reason in 3rd grade, I must have done really, really well on some Iowa Basic Skills test, because from that point on, I was in a talented and gifted group. And quite honestly, I felt intimidated as the years went on. I didn't feel like I belonged in that group. But one of the things that we did was future problem solving. Do you guys is that something that you still do, future problem solving? We did well at districts, and so we went on to state. And there was a bunch of us knuckle-headed middle schoolers in a hotel room. We all gathered in one hotel room, And we decided it would probably be a good idea. We had an ice bucket in our room and a bunch of ice, and we're on the 5th floor, and for some reason the window was open, so let's just chuck ice out the window at people walking by on the sidewalk. That sounds like a good idea, right? And we were the smart kids. We should have known better about this. But it didn't occur to us. The thing you use to think thinks it thinks better than it thinks. So another quick example. This was in 2014. This is a Norwegian teen who wanted to get a tattoo, and he was trying to figure out what kind of tattoo he should get. And I don't know how well you could see that, but he reached in his pocket and he had a receipt from McDonald's. And so he said, yeah, let's go ahead and tattoo my receipt from McDonald's on my arm. And so on social media, of course, he got lambasted and people were making fun of him. So he said, I'm going to double down on this idea. And a week later, he got the tattoo of his tattoo receipt from getting the first tattoo on his other arm. The thing you use to think thinks it thinks better than it thinks. Okay, let's talk about self-management, self-regulation. None of you do those kind of dumb things. Back in the early 1900s, we used to think that it was all about intelligence. If you were smart, you were going to be successful. There's a great study, a longitudinal study called Terman's Termites, where they took the best and the brightest and they did a longitudinal study, and they found out just because you're a genius doesn't mean success later in life. But by the time the 60s roll around, they were interested in this idea of self-management, this ability to delay gratification. We live in a culture of instant gratification. So if we have that discipline to hold off on what we want, even though we want it right now, to set it aside for greater goals, what will happen with that? And are you familiar with this? Do you know anything about the marshmallow test? So they sat 4-year-olds down at Stanford University. They sat them down and they put a marshmallow in front of them. And they said, here's the deal, kid. This marshmallow, you get a free marshmallow today. Have at it, it's yours. But here's the catch. I'm going to leave the room, and I'm going to be gone for 15 minutes. And if that marshmallow's still there when I get back, you get a second marshmallow. Well, as you can imagine, this is quite a predicament for 4-year-olds. And they would videotape these kids, and because my kids have no chance at being normal, when they turned 4 years old, I gave them the marshmallow test as well. Now, this is my son Silas. And he is now 15, but he was 4 at the time. Oh, yeah. Really, really tough. And my daughter Anessa, who's a firstborn overachiever, she had already passed the marshmallow test when she was 4, but she wanted to do it again just because that's what she likes to do. But they did longitudinal studies on these kids that were able to resist that marshmallow, and that they found that they were better prepared academically. They had more friendships. Yeah, this is where it gets a little, yay. There was, and some kids would close their eyes, some would turn around. One kid would pick up the marshmallow and just take a little piece of it and eat it and set it back down. I'm not sure how they judged that situation. My daughter, I knew she would fly by with flying colors. She would pass with flying colors. My son, I was a little nervous. And you have to think about this. 4-year-olds, 15 minutes. This is a long, long time for them to sit there. Yeah, let's just play with our eyes a little bit and pass the time. But this one test alone, look at him. He's just, And we're not around. Mom and Dad aren't around. We're not interacting with him at all. This is just him, and he's supposed to be just sitting on the chair, nice and normal. Yeah, she's going to play with her tongue here a little bit. My son had a problem in kindergarten. The teacher said, your son's doing a fine job here, but he falls out of his chair a lot. And how does he fall out of his chair? But yeah, he had trouble just staying on his chair like he did there. And so, yeah, here we are at the end. She's like, oh, I wanted to eat that marshmallow so bad. I wanted to, but I didn't. I'm very, very proud of myself. Good job, kiddo. Nice job. Little brother brings in the marshmallow. And then because I'm not great at giving directions, when my son passed and when Silas finally got his, he thought he was getting 2 more marshmallows for a total of 3. So he ultimately was a little disappointed in the end, but he was still pretty happy there. So teenagers, marshmallows, no big deal for you. But what is your marshmallow test? What is it that is hard to resist, that's so entertaining? You've done a good job of resisting it so far. I haven't seen any out so far. Right, it's your phones. It's your phones. That's your marshmallow test. And you have to know this, that it is truly a significant challenge for you. We know that companies make a lot of money off the fact that we know you cannot delay gratification. I'll give you a free app, that's no problem. But if you want to build a castle, it will take a day, but we can build it in for 99 cents in just a second here. Do you want more clues? No problem. $4.99, that gets you some more coins. They know this, and they're making a lot of money off of it. We spend roughly 5 hours a day looking at our phone. 2017 study, the mere presence of our smartphones face down on the desk in front of us undercuts our ability to perform basic cognitive tasks. We've started to just take away the phones from our kids when it's homework time because it's just too much of a temptation. And what they're finding, one psychologist called this a full-blown academic, but what one founder said, he said this: your kid is not weak-willed because he can't get off his phone. Your kid's brain is being engineered to get him to stay on the phone. There's positive reinforcement that's going on there that just keeps you. We get these little bursts of dopamine in our brain whenever we get a notification or whenever we get a like. It's difficult. We are being hardwired to stay on our phones. The goal is to make a diaper product, make something so addictive that we don't even want to get up to pee with some apps. Netflix CEO said this is fascinating, told investors that the company's main competition was customers' sleep. We want your eyeballs in front of a screen as much as we can. Anyone in here play an instrument, piano? It doesn't matter? Okay. So the first time that you played, whatever instrument you played, viola, violin, was it fun? Was it interesting? No, it's difficult to do that. I took piano for many years. Chopstick is maybe fun for a minute. But ultimately, an instrument takes practice. It takes some discipline to excel at that. And both my kids had to take piano lessons up until 8th grade. And it really, for me, it wasn't even about the piano. It was just really about the process of dedicating yourself to something that doesn't come easy. Something that does take many hours of practicing. And ultimately, the goal is when they play their piece at a recital, and they play it from memory, that experience, when they play it beautifully, that experience is so much more gratifying than anything that they could get from an app. And some of you who have dedicated yourself to the arts or to athletics, or you achieved a personal goal, you know that feeling, that rush that comes from that when you're able to have that self-discipline there. So with self-discipline, we need to check our emotions, understand those, and also keep those emotions in check. It gives you more maneuverability. Go back to my great colleague. He did not get angry. He did not respond emotionally in kind. He kept himself calm. The more self-aware, the better off you will be. And there's some advantages on keeping your cool. We did not have tennis here when I was in high school, but after I got done with my exhausting days of working as a lifeguard at the Parkersburg pool, and I'm saying that tongue-in-cheek, my dad and I would go and we would play tennis up here, and we would turn on the lights and we'd play till 11 o'clock at night. Now, I played on my college tennis team, but I was not very good. I didn't have any formal training whatsoever. And we were playing, and actually Lamar's, I think Takeo Westmar used to be out in your direction, if I'm remembering that right. I went to Sioux Falls College, it's University of Sioux Falls now. But we played Takeo Westmar, and I believe that's in your area. And it was the second time that we played them, and the first time our number one seed creamed their number one seed. And so what happens when you play a school the second time, they will move their number one seed down because there's no chance that they're going to beat that other person. So they're going to move them down to get a win. Well, I had just been moved up. I was a freshman. Somehow I moved up to the 3rd seed for that match, and it was me against Joe. And the senior on our team, the captain on our team, had just played him and said, Neil, this guy's pretty good, but he's a hothead. He gets flustered easily. So just keep that in mind when you play him. So normally, it's against the rules to swear on the court. Now, does that mean that they didn't? No, it happened all the time, and no one really enforced those rules. But I decided on this day, with Joe, I was going to enforce those rules. So sure enough, Joe hit a ball into the net, and he swore. And I approached him, and I said, Joe, I gotta tell you, that's against the rules to swear here, and so this is your official warning, and the next time you do it, I will be taking a point. And he lost it. He was so upset and so angry at me. His coach had to come in and calm him down. Now, I don't think the coach liked Joe all that much either, because he could have said to me, hey, just play tennis. What's your problem? He easily could have said that. But I think he kind of enjoyed watching this little meltdown, this temper tantrum that Joe was putting on. Now, Joe swore again, and it happened to be set point. I won the first set because Joe swore. And he was approaching the net, and he was glaring at me, and he was saying things like, David Letterman says things like, bite me. Can I say that to you, or is that too sensitive, or you're sensitive? I mean, he was just trying to engage me and get me to be upset, and I just ignored him. And I beat him in 2 sets, and afterwards he would not shake my hand. In fact, he wanted to fight me afterwards. The coach had to come back in. And there's no reason. He was a far superior tennis player. But I think some of you have had those experiences in athletics. When you know someone is not in control of their emotions, that gives you a competitive advantage. And the more that you're in tune with your emotions and keeping them in check, the better off you're going to be. All right. We're doing great. We're going to wind this up here with just talking about self-confidence, and then we're going to wrap this up. Self-confidence. Self-confident people are less needy. Self-confident people are not threatened by others' gifts, talents, and abilities. Why would that be the case? Why would I not be threatened by others' gifts, talents, and abilities if I'm self-confident? Because if I'm self-confident, I know what I bring to the table. And anything that you do, even if you outshine me, good for you, because that's not me. I'm not capable of that. You have some gifts and talents that I don't have. I'm happy for you. I'm not threatened by those things. There's a great leadership book called The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership by John Maxwell, and law numero uno says this. It's a law of the lid. And the law of the lid says, on a scale of 1 to 10, if I'm at a 4, on a scale of 1 to 10, no one else on my team can be above a 4. I cannot have 7, 8s, or 9s outshining me. So not only do I not encourage them, I actively work at tearing them down to bring them to my level. In the corporate world where I spend a lot of my time, I notice that A people hire A people. B people hire C people. Excellent people hire excellent people. They're not threatened by what they're bringing. They know they're going to be a huge asset on the team. But I want to talk, and we're going to do this here, and we're just going to take a minute or two, and I'm going to have you talk with your elbow buddies here. I love that term, by the way. That's a fantastic term. We all want self-confidence, but where do we get it? So I want you to just talk with someone around you for just a minute or two. Come up with some sources of self-confidence. And here's the other thing. I've been doing this a long time. Only a third of my audiences come up with the number one answer. So we'll see how smart this group is. Only a third comes up with the number one answer. Give you just 2 minutes to talk about some sources of self-confidence, and then we're going to wrap this up. Yeah. All right. So I'm just going to have you shout out some of the things that you came up with. Where do we get our self-confidence? We all want it. Where do we get it from? Any examples? And again, just shout it out. Yourself? Okay, but where do we get that? If it comes from ourself, what messages are we sending to get us there? Positive comments? Good, I like it. What else? Success. I like that. Success. We have some past successes. We said, look what we did. We can now go on and do some other things. Perfect. What else? Motivation. If you're self-motivated, you've had, again, set some goals for yourself, able to achieve that, going, wow, look what I was able to do. I was able to get my mile time down to whatever. I was able to lose 5, whatever it is. Yeah, there's some motivation there. I haven't heard number 1 yet. Peers, good. Getting feedback from others. They like us. They're encouraging us. They're seeing some good things there. We're getting some of that positive feedback. Fantastic. I love it. Self-acceptance, okay? So you're graceful with yourself. You don't beat yourself up all the time. Absolutely. And we'll talk about that. In fact, let's just talk about that right now. Do self-confident people make mistakes? Absolutely. Do less confident people make mistakes? Absolutely. But what's the difference between how you handle that? Self-confident people say, yep, my bad, missed it, and I'm sorry, and you apologize for it. And I think we're losing that ability. We're losing that ability to just freely admit when we make mistakes. We work so hard at protecting our egos that there are times that we just say, nope, screwed up royally, my bad. Others, because I haven't heard the number 1 answer yet. Fortnite? Fortnite, you get some confidence from that? I don't. I'm terrible at Fortnite. I feel worse about myself after I play Fortnite. I mean, I don't want to brag. I did have a 3-elimination game the other day, so, I'm feeling pretty good about that, but no, yeah. So if you have some success at something, I get it, yeah. Self-talk, positive self-talk, good. Environment, respect, hard work, I love all those things. Compliments, now you're getting desperate, aren't you? You're sensing that you're not going to get it. You're just throwing stuff out there. Is this it? Is this it? What's some of the foundations? What are some of the values of Ed Thomas Family Foundation? Faith. What's the second one? So why would that second one, let's stop there a second. Why would that be important? What's that? It's in the name. Your family of origin is big. During our formative years when we were young, if we received unconditional love from our parents, that told us on an unconscious level we are valued. We are important. We are worthwhile to spend time. With my background in psychology, and we'll wrap this up here with my background in psychology, one of the worst things that they could hear when they approached orphanages in foreign countries was not a lot of loud, screaming kids. The worst thing that they could hear? Silence. Because if they heard silence, that means the babies have learned it doesn't do any good to cry. It doesn't do it. I'm not going to get my needs met. So if you've had that foundational stuff where you've had someone who's loved you and cared for you unconditionally, that sets us up later. That builds in some of that self-confidence. That doesn't mean that it stays there. That doesn't mean that we still don't struggle with those things. But I work with kids who have been abused. I worked with kids who are perpetrators. They've had some things happen to them. They've experienced trauma. They have to get over that and then move on to some self-confidence, which is very, very challenging. Last thing, and I will finish up with this story here. Being teachable. Self-confident people are teachable. And because you're able to take that feedback, you're able to take some of that criticism. I'm going to tell you one last story that I experienced, and we'll wrap this up. I was, again, working in some of these group homes with tough kids. There was a psychologist there. He and I really hit it off. And we just had a good working relationship. He went on to work in another private practice another private practice, and I needed an internship. So I said, this is fantastic. Gary and I are buds. He's going to get me in there. One of his partners, huge respect for this man, doing awesome things in the therapy world. So if I could just get in there. So I begged him, and I finally got an interview, and there was 3 of them interviewing me. And the other 2 partners asked me about 3 or 4 questions, but it was my friend Gary that kept peppering me with question after question after question after question. And I had some answers for him, but soon my answers became educated guesses, and soon those answers became less and less educated and more just guesses. And finally, he asked me some sort of question about a Jungian approach to bipolar disorder or something like that, and I finally said, I don't know. And there was a silence, and it just hung there for a while, and it was uncomfortable. And then he asked me another question. He said, what took you so long to admit it? And I didn't like that question, and I didn't answer it. And he said, we knew you didn't know what you were talking about, 15 minutes ago. But it took you this long to admit that you didn't know. And here's the thing, Neil. We see a lot of potential in you. We think that you could add some things to this practice. But we've got 80 years of experience sitting on this side of the table. You've got 1.5 years. And if you come into this internship thinking you know it all, this isn't going to go very well. So I need you to be teachable. And I'm so thankful for that lesson that I got from that mentor. And I had a chance to have dinner with him a couple years ago, and he's great. He deflects things, and I was trying to compliment him, and he just and I said, no, Gary, you need to listen. You were impactful in my life. If I hadn't learned that lesson, I would run around thinking that I did know it all. So if there's one last lesson that I want you to take away, is self-confident people are teachable, and you put yourself in a place to learn things when you are humble, and know that it's all about growing. So we talked today about being self-aware, self-management, and self-confidence. And if you were able to implement those things, I think you're going to be just fine. My name is Neil Eady. My company's called Life IQ, and my wish for you is to live intelligently. Thank you so much for having me.